But so excited to have all of you on this Thursday. I know you could be anywhere. So the fact that you're here with us today, I really appreciate it. And I'm really, really excited about today's topic and also excited about today's guest expert. So Jennifer Spur will not be joining us, but we do have Emily, and I've had a chance to actually work directly with Emily. So I've experienced her magic and have seen her leverage storytelling for my own business firsthand. So I'm very, very excited to have her and very excited to have all of you as well. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is the People Before Strategy Roundtable. And I really want to make sure that you get what you want out of this space. I believe we've had one question submitted in advance, but I want to make sure that you feel comfortable asking questions at any point in time to our guest expert, to each other. So you are welcome at any point in time to unmute. You're also welcome to add in the chat as well. All right. So to get us started, it actually would be really nice to hear from you. So please feel free to in the chat, share your name, share your location. You're welcome to also share what you do. You're welcome also to drop your LinkedIn URL if that's something you feel comfortable doing as well. But would just love to learn a little bit more about who's in the room. And while we do that, I'm going to invite Emily to take a second to introduce herself and share a little bit more about the work that she does.
Thanks for having me, Crookston. My company is called The Pocket PhD. I am a business book ghostwriter, and I write business books for folks and people who want to be thought leaders, essentially. But that could be leader, expert, a lot of solopreneurs I also work with. And I met Akua through, I think, a networking group that we were both part of. And I helped her with some LinkedIn ghostwriting. So that was another service that I was offering at the time. I don't offer that anymore. But yeah, I'm also a developmental editor. I also edit books. And yeah, I live in Chapel Hill, North Carolina in the United States. And I've been owning and running my own business for about 9 years now.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to introduce yourself, Emily. Once again, those of you who are just joining, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We actually have a pretty small group. I don't know if anybody else will be joining. So maybe we could invite people who want to share out loud to introduce themselves. I mean, why not? That's what this space is for, also for connecting. So would anyone like to unmute? You're welcome to raise your hand, or you could simply unmute and share if you'd like to with the rest of the group.
I can be brave, Akua. My name is
Yay!
Elisa. I live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the United States, and I just opened a private tutoring company. I've been in business for about a year and a half so far. So I'm still a little bit newer, but I'm looking forward to this discussion today and learning a lot from everyone here.
Yay, so excited to see you, Lisa. Welcome. Hi, Haley. I see that you've unmuted. Nice to see you.
Hi. I am Haley Ristler, and I have worked with Akua a few times in the past, and she invited me to this roundtable, so I'm excited to join. I am a fractional CMO at my business, CopyClick Studio, and I usually work with digital CEOs who are really stressed out and need a second marketing or need another marketing brain in their business. That's where I step in. So, yeah, I live outside of Chicago and I'm excited to be here.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining. All right. Anyone else? All right. Well, once again, want to invite you to introduce yourself in the chat if that's something you feel comfortable doing, but just really excited to have all of you here once again. And of course, everyone who signed up will also receive the recording. All right. Would love to take a second to also introduce myself. And typically when I do this, I always actually start off by spelling out my name because I always get asked, how do you pronounce it? So my name is Akua. My father's from Ghana. He calls me Ikria. My mom is American. She calls me Akua. And I grew up mostly in places where they call me Aqua. I am not picky about it. And honestly, I have tons of different nicknames as well. If anything, it's one of the stories I always love to share at the beginning of a lot of my work. So I did a workshop today, and I think it's always a really great way to sort of break the ice. And sometimes I even invite people to share their nicknames as well. A really, really good way to really quickly connect with people and learn a lot about people by, better understanding how to pronounce their name, where their name came from, or even, their favorite nickname as well. The reason why I am so excited actually about this conversation is that I work for myself, so I don't always have someone to share my stories with necessarily. It's something, of course, I think about as it relates to my content and as I do, sessions like this. But I think that getting better at storytelling is something that I really prioritized at a point in my business, and I think it's such an important component of being able to build a successful business. Beyond that, I provide the leadership support I wish I had as a first-time co-founder and managing director. And if anything, that's really the reason why I even started my consultancy. And so I'm always really excited to be able to provide opportunities for leaders to reflect on where they are in their journey and whether or not they want to do something different. And then the last piece I think that's important to note about sort of who I am and the work that I do is that I believe that leadership is a cycle and system, right? It's not just a bunch of skills. It's really about constantly being able to tune into your own self-awareness and reflect on what you want to do and if you want to do something different. So just some things I always love to share about myself, at the beginning of these roundtables. And once again, I think we've had one or two new people join us. If you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat, you're welcome to do that. Or if you'd like to come off mute and also share out loud, would love to invite you to do that as well. All right.
Hi everyone, my name is Deep. My name is Deepcha, they go by Deep, and I'm excited to be here. I'm an old college brat. I don't know if you remember our college days, but very grateful for all of your work and eager to learn more today. Thanks.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join Deep. I have actually two college connections on this call, which makes me super excited and also makes me feel a little old. But super excited to have both of you in this space. All right. Anyone else? We have a few more people on this call who haven't had a chance to introduce themselves. If you want to come off mute, always invite that. Okay. All right. So we'll continue on. So we've done introductions. In terms of our agenda, it's pretty straightforward. We've done and checked off this first one. We're now going to get into storytelling and leadership. And once again, I want to invite everyone to ask their questions. You can ask your questions at any point in time. I put it here as the last thing, but if something comes up for you, pops up at any point in the time, please feel free to unmute or let me know in the chat. All right. Before we get into some of the questions that I have already for Emily, I did want to invite everyone to reflect on this little opener. And if you feel comfortable, would love to maybe hear what comes up for you, just as a little icebreaker, just as an opportunity to give people a chance to speak. Typically, I do this in small breakout rooms, but I think there's enough of us here. I think we could do it all together, actually. I don't think we necessarily need to go into rooms for this. But would love to hear from you. What was the last story you told yourself? And this can be in your personal or your professional life. And the second piece of it was, what impact did it have on you? So what was the last story you told yourself and what impact did it have on you? So when I was putting together this prompt, I just thought, relate somewhat to storytelling. And to start us off, I would say one thing I was thinking about this morning, it's a little bit more personal, but the last story I told myself that I don't think necessarily served me, so maybe this is my coaching brain coming into space, was that I had to work out for a certain amount of time. So I grew up playing a lot of sports. I was an athlete in college. I still try and play a lot of sports. And so one of the things I've been trying to fit in is workout time for me. And I realized that I somehow correlated like good working out with working out for a certain period of time. And I think that's really a story that I'm trying to get rid of. So it's sort of forced me to not work out, simply because I say to myself, I don't have enough time, so I can't do anything. Where I think that even if I have 5 minutes, I think I can do something that would still get me moving. So that's just a quick example, not necessarily the most constructive one, but that's just a quick story or a quick example of the last story I told myself and sort of the impact that it had on me. All right. So we have a few more people joining us. So I think we might have to go into breakout rooms, or this will actually take quite a bit of time. All right. So welcome to those of you who are able to just join us in the last few minutes. We're doing just a quick little people before strategy opener. And so what I want to invite everyone to do is just reflect on this question here. And so the question is, what is the last story you told yourself? What impact did it have on you? So I simply shared that, recently I've realized that I was telling myself a story about how long I had to work out. Playing sports is really important to me. And so what that did was it sort of impacted my willingness to work out because I always felt like I needed to have at least an hour, when in reality, I can do something even in 5 or 10 minutes. So it sort of has had this negative impact on me. All right. So I want to invite each of you to reflect on this question. I will put you into breakout rooms. If you do not want to go into a breakout room, that's absolutely fine. You're going to have about 2 to 3 people in your breakout room. If you don't want to be in the breakout room, you do not have to leave. All right. But it's just a quick opportunity for us to reflect on some of the storytelling we do internally. All right. Any questions before I put you in your rooms? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and put you in rooms. There will not be enough time to necessarily do a full introduction of yourself. All right. So I'll just give you 5 minutes. So please make it really fast. All right. Here we go. All right. So those of you who are still in this room, any questions or anyone what I'm going to be sharing here? You're also welcome to let me know in the chat. All right. So Dennis has joined. Adiza, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Are you able to join your room? Great. Welcome back. Welcome back. All right. So I think we have a few seconds left and everyone will make their way back in. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Okay. What was that like? Would anyone like to maybe share? Haley's like, yes. All right. Anyone like to maybe share a thing or two that came up or that was interesting during the conversation?
I can share.
Hi.
Hi everyone. My name is Shanae Brown. I'm an executive coach in New York City. So I have the pleasure of chatting with Deep, and we literally just talked about how hard we are on ourselves and the
Yeah.
stories that we have been telling ourselves. My story was related to being a business owner and feeling like in order for things to go through, it needs to be perfect. And Deep story was around, juggling her responsibilities and, feeling like if she's good at one area, she must be bad at the other. And how can the two coexist? So our takeaways from our chat was really about telling ourselves a new story that we do not have to be perfect. Like we can allow ourselves to be human and also understand that sometimes your focus is going to be in another area and it doesn't necessarily mean that you are bad at it.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, right? And like stories are so powerful, right? That's really what I was trying to get at by giving everyone an opportunity to reflect on this. Would love to maybe hear from one more person if anyone else is willing to share. Thank you so much for sharing in the chats. Let's see here. Thank you. I appreciate that this person did type out their name to eat piso. Am I saying that correctly? I appreciate that breakdown. It was such a pleasure connecting and sharing our stories. I learned to rein myself in. My story may be from lived experiences, and that's okay. Thank you so much for sharing. Yes. All right. I think I saw a hand up. Chizon.
Oh, I
Yes.
did raise my hand, but you had you had mentioned that you wanted to speak to people, but then I'll
Oh
go
no, feel
ahead.
free. Yeah.
So I okay, so I had a chat with Larry, and it was such a coincidence that she was sharing about a people problem that she was having in her team, and that was the reason why she was here. And it was just such a coincidence that she was speaking to a people person because I'm in HR. And and then we really got to talk, and I was also able to share what I was currently, what I was currently also telling myself. But we were able to speak, and then I was also able to let her know that I was open to support her with the challenges she's having in her team. So yeah.
That's amazing. Sounds like a great connection. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. All right. So hopefully everyone's had an opportunity just to reflect a little bit more on what's going on, right? Up in here in this brain. And I think that's why this topic of storytelling is so important, right? We tell ourselves stories. We also tell other people's stories, both implicitly and explicitly, right? And so really taking the time to reflect on storytelling just in general, I think can be incredibly powerful, which is why I'm so, so excited to have Emily today. All right. So I have a few questions for Emily. Once again, I invite all of you to also reflect on questions for Emily or even the group as a whole. I think here we have so many amazing people with so many amazing experiences. So feel free to bring up other sort of people, culture related questions as well. All right. And we can also sort of learn from each other at any point as well. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the share here. And Yep, stop the share. And get started with my questions for Emily. All right. So, Emily, my first question here is, and you sort of shared a bit more about your background earlier, but just as a reminder for those who maybe weren't around for introductions, Emily is a ghostwriter and developmental editor. And what she really does is she helps leaders translate complex ideas into compelling narratives. What do you think is one of the biggest mistakes that you see leaders make when they're trying to tell a story, especially within the business context? And in addition to this mistake, maybe what is something they can do differently or a way that they could potentially correct this?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think one big challenge or mistake that people have is in business is they don't know where or when to tell stories. Sometimes business owners and people, VPs and coaches and people, all kinds of all range of people in business. Sometimes they feel like they need to focus really hard on educating their audience. And I think they sometimes think that that is not related to storytelling, whereas I think of education as being entirely related to storytelling. It's really hard to get a lesson across unless you start with a story. That's what sticks in people's minds. That's what gets people interested in paying attention. But I think sometimes it's hard to have maybe your personal stories could connect to your business, or you're a little worried about being too vulnerable in telling a story. So I think that the best thing you can do to kind of avoid those challenges is to think, I think, more conversationally about the work that you do. Like, imagine you're talking to one of your clients. You would probably naturally tell a story. You'd probably naturally, talk about how, oh, here's how it worked for someone else. Like, you just kind of make those moves naturally when you're in a conversation. But somehow when we sit down to write out our stories, we forget that we can be conversational, or we go to like our English 101 brain and start, worrying about sentence structure and like all the technical stuff about writing, as opposed to just, just tell it, just say it. Or we worry that it needs to be somehow more formal or something like that. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely something I struggled with, when I first started my business, feeling like I had to write in a certain way. And now I feel like it's full
Yeah.
circle, because now I feel like I sort of constantly am copywriting and don't know how to put together real sentences, and write a real structured paragraph. So I think that's so
Mm.
interesting. Do you have any tips or, tricks to support leaders with sort of making that transition? I mean, should they even be thinking about more structured writing? What are the right spaces for them to use that more conversational approach?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think if you're writing something that's long form, then it probably should have paragraphs and it probably should have a pretty proper structure, like an article for a fast company or something like that, or you're writing a blog post for your website, or a guest post for someone. But social media has really trained us to write short, hooky kind of sentences and stuff. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think there's a good reason for that. That's what captures people's attention, and that's what sticks with them. And translating those can be a challenge. It kind of depends on the person. And like, some people like to write long pieces first and then chop them up into short pieces. Some people like to write really short pieces and sort of weave them together on a similar theme. And I think both of those can work for you in content creation. I, for a long time, talk about stories that we tell each other. For a long time, I was like, I really want to create this like cascading content calendar for myself. Cool, I think you do this, and I think it works really well for you. It's like, the Roundtable has a theme, and that theme connects to a bigger LinkedIn article, and then you pull out pieces for your social media all month long. Like, that's, you build this big thing, and then you just like cascade down the pieces. And I think that's really cool, but it just doesn't vibe with the way that my brain works or something. I can never get that kind of system to work for myself. And I've kind of learned to just let that flow, let it work, the way that it wants to. I write one blog post a month, and I write 4 email newsletters a month, and they don't really relate to each other most of the time. Like, one of the emails will relate to the blog post where I'm saying I wrote a blog post, go read it. But yeah, the rest of it is much more like, what do I want to talk about this week or whatever in 2 weeks? And yeah, I mean, that feels good to me. I think it works with my audience. I think it just helps me stay fresh. But yeah, some people really like a framework, and like everything just comes from this bigger framework that they have. And I think that's awesome because it helps you really organize things. And so, maybe it just takes time to get there or something. I don't know. But um, yeah, I mean, we all need content. We all need to put out as much as we can. So it's kind of like, well, whatever works for you. That's kind of the best approach, I think.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So one sort of context, right, that can help to guide sort of what you're sharing, how you're sharing it, and then also recognizing that there's not maybe one perfect way to do this. And I think sometimes,
Right.
whether we work within corporate or we have our own business, we feel like there's one specific way it has to look. And, I know one of the things I definitely struggle with, and I'm curious to hear from some of the other business owners on the call, is sort of the, shiny object syndrome. Like, oh, this person does this and I have to do that too. Oh, this person does this, right? Or this leader
Yeah.
within an organization is showing up in
Yes.
this way. And so I feel like I have to show up in a similar way as well.
Yeah, that comparison trap. It can mess with us. Yeah.
Yeah. So would love to open it up. Would any, before I get to some of my additional questions, would anyone else like to sort of share their experience, whether it's sort of supporting leaders through something similar, or maybe even, share their own experience as they try to sort of get their own foothold in storytelling or trying to put themselves out there and sort of sharing their thoughts, whether that's, through social media or even through speaking? Hi, Nikita. Nice to see you.
Good, nice to be here. Thank you so much for having us. I have a quick question for Emily. Have you been able to apply storytelling in academia? I heard you say earlier, educating in a business format, educate you can educate your clients through storytelling. And I would love to hear
Mm.
more about that. But from an academic standpoint, we
Yeah.
tend to be very structured, like APA, MLA style. Like,
Right. Yeah.
is there a way to bring more of the creative kind of storytelling and
Mm.
narrative to academia writing? And if so, do you have any tips or tricks or like resources to go to kind of help you navigate through that?
Ooh, yes, I love this question. So I have a PhD in philosophy, and when I first started copywriting, content marketing, the person who was helping me, I became her marketing intern, and she was like, "Oh, I thought your writing would be much more academic, much more rigid, than it is." And it turns out that I've always had a little bit more of a conversational style even in my academic writing. And that served me really well in business because the blog posts that I started out writing for people and the articles that have written for people, it's very, I think of it as technical, very technical writing. You say the big point, you give your bullet points in support of that big point, and then you kind of wrap it up. And that simple framework helps me pretty much in everything that I'm writing, whether it's a book or an article. Um, but I would say that there are some academics who can do that really well. I think it's very hard to bring in story as an academic, mainly just because there's like an attitude that you shouldn't do it in a lot of disciplines. Um, but I'm a little bit of a rule breaker these days. Like I say, well, should what you like? That's if I can tell a story at the beginning of a talk and it brings people in, then that's great. I don't really care if some academic is out there being like, "Well, that was a bad way to start a talk." Um, so I would just say, think about yourself giving like more of a TED talk than an academic talk. TED Talks are really story based. So what would that can be one way to orient yourself. Like, oh, I have to give a talk. Let's pretend I'm going to give a TED talk. And just like, what would that look like? It would probably be a little different. And also the thing about storytelling is whenever you have data to present, it's so much nicer to present data in a story form than to just put some statistics out there. You have to put those statistics in context. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. So why not make that context story based? Why not talk about how here's why I care about these numbers? Like I think we leave out that, some people would call it like, it's just your opinion. Like we leave out the opinion part a lot. But that's the thing that really connects with people. Because if you say, here's why I started looking at these numbers, people are like, oh, that I can relate to that. But just numbers on a page, it's just not very helpful. So anytime you're using data, I always recommend like, why should anyone care about these numbers? Why do you care about them? And if you don't care about them, why are you putting them out there? Why are you talking about them? Just because you think you need data, right? So yeah, I think coming at it from that internal perspective of like why it matters, I think that always leads to good stuff. And the same with educating someone. Why should they care about it? Well, the reason I care about this topic is blah, blah, blah. And I think that's a really nice way to start.
Yeah, and I think that translates really nicely into the workplace as well, right? Simon Sinek always says start with the why. And I think that's the
Yeah.
same as we're thinking about motivating people, setting expectations. To your point about data, I've worked with so many leaders who ask their employees to do certain things and set certain KPIs and targets, and people don't understand how it connects to anything, right? And so that
Right.
storytelling really can, in that why piece, I think can be really, really powerful. Once again, whether you're educating potential clients or even thinking about setting expectations with your subordinates as well.
Yeah, that's right. I talked to so many people who left corporate because there wasn't story connected to the stuff they have to do. It was just like the carrot and stick, well, oh, you don't like it, you can leave. Like, no,
Yes.
that doesn't work for me. Like, if I'm going to do this work, I want to know why, and I want it to have some meaning, and that doesn't have to be like a big existential meaning. It could just be, this makes it easier for the sales team to do blah, right? Like, whatever it is, just tell me. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well said. All right. Any other questions before I move forward, or any other thoughts before I move forward to my next question? All right. Well, Emily, I'd love for you to maybe share a little bit more about your book. So Emily has a book called Unwritten: The Thought Leader's Guide to Not Overthinking Your Business Book. And it's really about, encouraging people to sort of act kind of before they're ready. Would you say that's kind of the
Yeah.
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 So, how do you help leaders work through this, I don't know, curse of perfectionism? Even if
Yeah.
they're still trying to figure out, what their vision is, or maybe what their framework is, whatever that thing they're looking to share.
Yeah. So, yeah, the book is Unwritten: The Thought Leader's Guide to Not Overthinking Your Business Book. And it's about how to write, publish, and promote your book. So, it's great for first time authors. But you're right. The main focus is around overthinking because I see a lot of business owners who are writing books, overthinking those books because they think, oh, the writing has to be perfect. Like, we go back again to that English 101 brain where I got to sit down and write this very long thing, and that's scary and hard, and it's easy to be like, no, I don't have time for that right now, and to let a month slip by since you've worked on your book. So I always encourage people to do is to get that first draft done as quickly as possible. If you want to write a book, set yourself a goal for a certain word count, and I always tell people that a perfectly reasonable business book is 40,000 words. It's a good target. You might be wanting to write like a 20,000 word book. That's fine also. But figure out your target word count goal, figure out when you'd like to have this thing written, and then do some simple math to figure out how many words you need to write each week to get to that word count goal. And you get that draft done. And so I say, something like, you could write 500 words a day when you have time to write 500 words. That doesn't mean every day, but if you can get to yourself to write 500 words when you have time to sit down and write, then you can get there very quickly. You'll be surprised how quickly you can get there. And yeah, putting ideas out there, even though you don't feel ready, you're scared, like you're not sure. That's one thing I encourage authors to do all the time. Like, social media is a perfect place to test ideas. And you can call it that. You can think of it as a test. And it can be just like one little idea from your book that you just pop out into a social media post and see what kind of reaction you get. Because if you never test out ideas before your book comes out, you really don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if that idea is even going to connect with your audience. So it's tough. It's scary. It's not fun to put out ideas you haven't thought fully through. You might get someone saying, oh, this is totally the wrong direction. But at least now you know, and now it's not in print for all of like your whole life, right, in perpetuity. And so that it gives you like the feedback that you need. So I always think the best, what I see among my ghostwriting clients, and this has been like a real eye-opening experience for me because I've written books for people and those people haven't even published those books. Like, even people who use ghostwriters don't always publish their books, which is fascinating to me. And I think the difference between the people who publish their books and the people who don't is that the people who are publishing their books are thinking of the book as the start of a conversation. So it's not the end all be all. It's not your last word on the topic. If you change your mind 100%, you go in the 180 degrees the other direction. That's amazing. You can write the next book about why you were wrong in the first book. Like, it's okay. Like, you can absolutely change your mind. That gives you permission. It gives you reason to write another book. So just thinking of it as the start of a conversation can help us kind of release some of that perfectionism or the just any ideas we have in our heads about what the book should be and comparing it to other books, all of that. Like, it's just a snapshot of your brain. I say that a book is a snapshot of your brain.
Yeah. And I actually think that's a great segue to question here. And I think once again, this question is, I think, relevant whether we're thinking about it from the perspective of putting together a book, writing a blog post or a LinkedIn post, or even thinking about how you show up in the workplace. But, how do you coach leaders to include vulnerability, tension, or imperfection in their
Mm,
stories? I think one of the things I see with a lot of the leadership clients I work with is this idea of only getting one chance. And so I love,
yeah,
your idea of like, you have an opportunity to sort of course correct if you like. I feel like that's
mhm,
easier to say than some people maybe will take on as a
yeah,
story. But
yeah.
I think it's always like, people are thinking about balancing, how do I be vulnerable, share these tensions, these decisions I made that aren't maybe perfect, but I don't want to
Mm,
compromise my credibility and authority, right? I think that's a really
yeah.
big one. And I see the same even when people are
Mhm.
thinking about communicating change management, initiatives and transformation initiatives, right? They sort of are
Yeah,
like, I want to say I'm scared, but if I say I'm scared, will I still be able to be that leader? Right? And this is even just
right.
communicating it orally. This is not even necessarily a book that's going to go
Hmm.
beyond an organization's walls.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a huge challenge and a huge issue. I think sometimes, especially even for women, especially for women leaders, where I think a lot of leaders feel like if they show any vulnerability at all, then yeah, it's going to zap their credibility. Their team's not going to follow them. Um, I think there's a lot of stories that show that the opposite is the case. I think you also though have to take into account the culture in your work, and you can't go against the culture 100%. As much as we try to change our shift the culture and shift it to be more vulnerable, sometimes you're just like up against the wall with some of this stuff. So I think if you want to be super safe and still be able to be vulnerable, one thing you can do is share stories about past successes, past times when you were vulnerable or something went really wrong, something failed, something, you made a big mistake, and look, you survived, the sky didn't fall. You can talk about those failures as successes today. Like, that's a way to be vulnerable without giving up credibility, because you showed that you can handle it, you can survive a challenge, and that can be really inspirational to team members as well. But I always try to encourage leaders to be as vulnerable as they can, as vulnerable as they feel comfortable being, even in the moment when it's hard, because team members can also really appreciate. It's hard for me too as a leader. I know it's hard on you all, and I'm trying to mitigate the challenge as much as I can for you. But we're in a period of change, and it's hard at the leadership level. We don't know what's going to be coming next, right? So in that way you can connect with people, without being like, oh, I'm a chaotic leader, I don't know really what's happening. If you just are real with people and transparent, I think they can understand where you're coming from. So I think those are the best strategies. I had another thought that I wanted to share. um, I think that, oh, yes, Brené Brown talks a lot about vulnerability as a leader, and I think that's really helpful. And one of the things she talks a lot about is you have to be, as a leader, you have to be vulnerable in a way that doesn't emotionally burden your team. So, as a leader, you're going through something personal, it's fine, I think, to talk about that, but you have to be careful about how you talk about it. It can't be like, oh, please save me from this challenge that I have. And oh, you don't know the burdens that I'm carrying, and it can't be like putting shame on people, like, can't you step up your work, because don't you know how hard I'm struggling over here? Like, I really need you to perform better. Like, you can't make those kinds of, I don't think you can make those kinds of requests of a team like that. That feels a little not good, because you're putting your emotional burden on someone else. But I do think there's a delicate balance. There's a way to walk the line, but it's hard to talk about in general terms. Like, it depends on the culture, it depends on the person, it depends on their comfort level and the team dynamic. But I think that thinking about those things, journaling about them yourself, like, you want to have a conversation about vulnerability, role play it in your journal, like, try it out, test it out, see how it feels. I think just being intentional about these conversations is probably the best tip, the best thing we can do.
I love that. So maybe, yeah, a little preparation, a little like sort of role playing, sort of stepping into potentially maybe like even empathy, stepping into other people's
Yeah.
shoes and sort of
Yeah.
seeing how it might feel or potentially look like from another perspective.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
all really, really great thoughts. All right, so I have two more questions. So I'll share my one before last question, and once again, would love to open it up to see if anyone else has any questions or other thoughts. And then we have another question um, from the group. But this question here is: in your work, you help clients build a thought leadership ecosystem. So book, content, and then speaking. Sort of this really great, I
Hmm.
think cycle. When it comes to internal storytelling, so within a team or organization, what elements from that ecosystem can be applied? And maybe any
Mm.
thoughts on what can be adapted or what might need to be done differently?
Yeah, this is a great question too. I mean, in my own brain, I don't think there's that much of a separation between
Yeah.
those things. Because I think the best way to be a strong and vulnerable leader is to share what you're thinking with your team as well as outside the team. Like there should be, some transparency there. So I don't think it makes a lot of sense to have a different perspective. And I think that it's always good to try out ideas on different audiences and different groups of people. So if there's something you're thinking about putting on social media, why not test it out with your team first? Like play with the idea, see what they have to say, because I don't know about you, but whenever I have a conversation or share a new idea that I have, I always expand on that idea after the conversation. It always sparks more for me. Like yesterday, for example, I was working on my email newsletter, and I've started doing this thing that's called 52 bold ideas. It's the ideas that you create like a 52 email sequence for yourself, an evergreen sequence that can run in the background. And I just started this success coach program. Um, and I read the prompt, it was the second prompt. And it was about, talking about a new tool that you're using in your business. Great prompt. But I got very much in my head and stuck around like, oh, I need a tool and a system that I'm creating that I can share with people. And I don't really have that. I was thinking about a tool that more of a mindset tool that I learned this past weekend. And I wanted to share about that as a tool, but wasn't really fitting with the prompt. But I just talked to my friend who's also in the same program with me, and she was like, "Oh yeah, you don't have to, just talk about it. Maybe this is the tool. Here, talk about it like this. Be more general about it. Don't worry about the systemizing of it." And that really helped me. And then I just was able to write the newsletter, because when I left off talking to her, I was like, I don't know. I think I'm not going to send a newsletter this week. But then I woke up this morning and I was like, oh yeah, this is it. And so I just kind of wrote it. So that's another thing, like a team or an audience can be really helpful when you're stuck on an idea or you're not sure if this something. It's like a Jerry Seinfeld quote, right? Is this something you can go in with that kind of question to your team? I think that works.
Absolutely love that. Yeah. So testing it, right, and recognizing that once
Yeah.
again, that intended impact, the perception can shift. And so making sure that, whatever message you have, whatever why you're sharing is really landing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely love that. All right. So once again, I mean, time always flies. So we have about
Yeah.
10 minutes left. So once again, did want to open it up to see if anyone had any questions or thoughts they wanted to share. And then I did have a question sort of from the audience. I will say I'd love to open it up to everyone. Emily, I don't know if this is something you could necessarily answer. We'll give you, of course, the first shot to answer it, but would love to open it to everyone to hear their thoughts
Yeah.
on this question. All right. So any other questions, or maybe I can just read this one. All right. Well, if anyone has any other questions, feel free. So this question is actually from someone who just had to leave, but she'll see the recording.
Oh.
Um, how do you convince high performers who get along well with clients and do an excellent job to see the value in completing their administration work? So in this case, right, these, employees, I guess, are great at their client-facing work,
Mm.
show up for their client-facing work, but don't necessarily do the admin and sort of reporting piece. So I don't know, Emily, if you have any thoughts on how to get them to understand why, a story we could tell them to help them tap into why this is important. And once again, want to invite
Yeah.
anyone else who maybe has any expertise or thoughts they wanted to share on that question as well to share their thoughts.
Yeah, I'm sure others have more experience with this than I do, but I did work with some writers for a while. Akua knows she worked with my writers, and yeah, that was a little bit of a challenge for some to make sure they're like tracking their work and telling us. And the reason that they needed to do it was because once they finished drafting it or whatever, the next person needed to edit it. Probably me. I had to edit it, so I needed to know when it was ready for my eyes. So I think most people, if you can explain it to them in that kind of way, like here's why this is important for you to do, I think most people can be responsive to that. um so that would be like first piece, like are you it to them in those terms, like why is it important? If they think it's just like checking a box or something, then I think there's a conversation there, like maybe it is just checking, do they need to do that? Like, like is that something that needs to be done? And if it's like, yeah, because of regulation or because of whatever hierarchy, okay, that's another reason to get it done, and maybe just have to do it because even if it's boring, that kind of thing. I don't know.
I love that. Yeah.
Love
So
to hear
maybe
other
one,
thoughts. Yeah.
yeah, maybe one sort of checking to see, okay, what exactly am I having them doing? Is it actually adding value? And then two, sort
Yeah.
of sharing the why behind it, right? So you completing
Mhm.
this allows these other things to happen. There's some dependencies here, right? I'm not just making you do this for the sake of doing it, because I have a big ego and I just enjoy making you do additional work. I absolutely
Right.
love that. Yeah. Anyone
Yeah.
else have any thoughts, or even other questions for Emily?
So I love what you just said about is it adding value? And I find myself asking myself that about a lot of the work that we're doing, which is really a lot of the check the box work. So I've started to challenge myself to not to go beyond is it adding value and get into where can I increase the value of what's being done, or
Oh.
where can I bring my own value to it, because a lot of what I'm doing, and I work with a lot of high performers, our culture is so toxic, and I'm always so shocked because everyone agrees and will say, oh, this is so toxic, it's so overwhelming, there's so much hierarchy, so much regulation, so much check the box, but no one wants to change it. Everybody's just performing, performing, performing. And I'm just so,
Mhm.
why do humans be human and just stay in it? Like, why do we stay in there and stay stuck right there? Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
obviously there are intrinsic values and all sorts of reasons why people have, you have to put food on the table and all of those reasons, but we all agree like the toxicity of it, like, is it even worth it? So I try to bring like adding a value to it versus is it adding value, because we all agree, I mean, it might be
Mm.
adding value to the business line, but it's not adding value to us humans and working together
Yeah.
collectively as a team.
Yeah.
It's very curious.
Mm.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that reflection, right? And I think we're at a time right now in the world where a lot of people are reflecting on those elements, right? Especially as AI is coming
Mm.
for all our jobs. So like, what is it that
Mhm.
we're really adding? What are we even doing at work if we have the privilege to ask ourselves that? Because we might be asking
Mm.
ourselves, well, will AI take over my job? Right? So what makes me different maybe from AI is maybe even a question we're asking ourselves. One thing I think that's really interesting, recently I've been reading a little bit more about is this idea of like meaningfulness at work and what that looks like, and how what we consider meaningful looks very different to everyone, right? I don't think two people would ever describe meaningful in the same way, but I think,
Mhm.
Nikita, you bring
Yeah.
up a good point as well, is that we do live in a world where fortunately or unfortunately we need resources, right? We do live in a capitalist world. I didn't create it, but I'm just living in it, right? And so there's this piece of sometimes we just have to show up, whether we find that work meaningful or whether or not we
Mm.
feel like we're even adding value as well.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, to close us out, we have about 5 minutes. To close us out, Emily, I will be asking you maybe what is one thing that you'd love for everyone to take away from the conversation. I invite you to
Mm.
reflect on that because I do have a few slides I always like to share at the end. So want to invite everyone to provide some feedback on how this space was today. I always want to make sure this space is as relevant as possible. I know we don't have that much time together, but I hope you did get one or two nuggets you can take away, or at least have made a connection that you can follow up with after as well. So please do share your feedback. That's always really helpful for me as I think about what to do in this space and who to invite. I'm actually already thinking about my guests for next year. So if you have any suggestions or you're interested yourself, would love to hear from you. And then, of course, want to invite you to join our next roundtable. We have two incredible women that will be joining us. I will say one of the things I am thinking about for next year, I do tend to have mostly women, which I think is interesting. Maybe that's just the reality of my network. I have had some men, but recently it's been mostly women. But next year, or next month, sorry, we'll be talking about authenticity, which I think is really interesting. And so we have two amazing guest experts, one author and executive coach who does some really interesting work around authenticity. And then I have one of my MBA classmates, actually. So Diana, MBA classmate based in Kenya, who'll be joining us as well. And she's done some really interesting work in HR. So really excited to have both of them. And I hope I will see you at our next roundtable where we'll be discussing authenticity, how to be true to yourself, and what that maybe even looks like, and whether or not that evolves over time. All right. So thank you so much once again for joining us. Would love to then pass it back to Emily. What is one thing you hope everyone takes away, or one thing you think everyone should keep in mind as it relates to storytelling?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just to put stories out there as much as you feel comfortable, and not to be too perfectionist about it, not to be too precious with your ideas and your words, because you're gonna learn something and you're gonna teach someone else something in the process. And yeah, just don't be shy about sharing your voice. Just put it out there.
I love that. Thank you so much, Emily, for taking the time to join me. Thank you also very much for being here. We do have a few minutes left, so I will stay on. Emily, you still have time yet. So if you have
Yeah,
any additional
sure.
questions, we're happy to be here. We'll still be here. So feel free to stay on if you have any. But if not, just thank you again. I hope to see you next month. And thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, how do we connect with Emily? That's a really good point.
Oh
I
yeah,
will be sharing a follow-up email with her LinkedIn URL, and I can also just grab it now as well. Let me just go ahead and do that.
yeah, I threw it in earlier, but
Okay,
here's
I
my
will.
website.
All right, so she'll drop it in there again.
I'll drop it. Yeah. Here's my LinkedIn. And here's the Amazon link to the book.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you.
Hope you enjoy the rest of your day and have a great weekend. It's almost here. Like, that's what I'm telling
Almost here.
myself. The weekend is almost here.
Awesome.
Thanks so much.